Welcome to the Grounded Presence Podcast, a place for exploring authentic identity, deep community, and the ever-evolving spiritual journey. I'm your host, Daniel Powell, and I have a rather short episode for you today. But it all starts with the internet. And I don't think I'm alone when I say that most of the time that I spend on the internet just feels like wasted time. It just seems like it requires a lot of output, mental energy for its very little redeeming value. And this is especially true. You all know it. It's especially true when it comes to social media. But this week has been a little bit different for me. And I'm actually ending the week feeling like I've gained more from social media than it's required from me. And I'm ending the week with a net positive of relational energy instead of negative, a deficiency. So basically what I'm telling you is I've seen the equivalent of a unicorn. And I want to share that experience with you. And not to mention, it's led me down a really interesting path of thought that I'm also going to share with you. It's just led me into thinking about, though it may seem disconnected, it's just led me into this space of thinking about ancient sacred texts and what might be the modern form of sacred writing that could be happening right under our noses. And I know how that sounds. It sounds really lofty, really academic, and maybe weird, but it's really not at all. It's really just super relational. So just stick with me here. I got some good things to say. And if you're someone that's ever wished that there was more meat, more depth, and more just overall humanness, in the religious tradition that you were raised in, well, you're just going to love this episode. So without any further ado, let's get into episode 23, the sacredness of human experience. Well, I'm going to do something I don't normally do on this week's show, and that's I'm going to record it straight through. And I'm going to leave in all the pauses, all the ums, and all the awkward silences. Because I'm going camping with my family this weekend. And right now the choice is between spending time with the family in nature or staying home and polishing a podcast. And I don't have to tell you what the obvious choice is there. So anyways, here we go. We're going to see how I do. But I just got to share with you about this past week. It's been a really cool week. Most weeks, just spending any time on the internet or on my phone, it feels just like such a waste of time. But this past week has been a really good week. And I've actually found myself having some redeeming experiences on the internet, just as I've been flicking through and swiping through my phone. And there were these two things that I stumbled upon that just hit me on such a deeper level than most things that I normally see, links from Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. But there were these two things I encountered that just hit me on a really, really deep level. And, one of them, I won't go into too much depth on them, but one of them was a video about this woman, or a video this woman had recorded talking about her divorce and just her husband getting into drugs and just like the toll that it took on the family. And yeah, it was just a really raw video of her experiences. And what I really liked about it, or what I shouldn't say what I liked about it, but what spoke to me through it was just the way that she was talking about it. she was talking about it in such a way where it was just her having these experiences and sharing them with you. There wasn't any judgment. There wasn't any, she just wasn't deflecting or avoiding her own experiences, but she was sharing those with you and inviting you into those. And, normally I don't have a bandwidth for like more than 3 minutes. If somebody sends me a YouTube link, I look at the link and I'm like, this video is 8 minutes long. Like somebody's expecting me to watch 8 minutes of it. But, this video I'm referring to is one that I got to through, clicking a few links, and it was actually a 20-minute long video. And I watched the whole thing just because of how much it drew me in and because of how much it just spoke to me on that deep human level. And the second thing I saw this week was this article. It was just a brilliantly written article that was really special to me. And it was an article that somebody had posted on Facebook, that somebody had, a post on Facebook to a link on LinkedIn. But this article that somebody had written about the death of their child, how it was just kind of like a freak thing, and this child died in their sleep, and it was totally unexpected. Just inviting you into the experiences around an unexpected death of a child. This article, this story just took you through all the regret that he felt, for getting frustrated with his child the night before and not, working too much and not spending enough quality time with his kids frequently enough. And I'm not doing it justice here. But it's just something, I think it's just something you really have to read. And especially as a parent, it just resonated so deep with me, and it pushed me into this moment that just made me breathe a little deeper and taste the sweetness of the moment just a little more. It just left me inspired, and also at the same time wishing that there was more of that kind of stuff on the internet. And I hope that this podcast is one of those things, and I hope that it's one of those things for you in your life on some small level. I don't think I can touch the power behind those two resources that I experienced this week. But yeah, I hope it's a little respite and something that just helps the air taste a little bit sweeter and calmer in your life. But thinking about this video that I saw and this article that I read, the only word that I could use to describe the experience, the interaction that I had with them, is sacred. Having that experience on that deep level of human, it's just something so sacred about that. And, as I kicked that word around in my head, there came this moment when I started thinking about how we usually use the words sacred and religious pretty interchangeably, like in reference to a sacred text or a religious text. I think for all intents and purposes, those seem pretty similar on the surface, and the sacred experience that these two resources imparted to me and engaged me in, that's not an experience that I've ever gleaned from the Bible, which was the sacred, the religious text of my upbringing and my tradition. And that makes sense, because most of that book, or most of the books in that book, weren't written with the intent of connecting with others on a very, very deep human level. Maybe a few were. I'm definitely no scholar. I could see, what is it? Maybe like Psalms, the songs of the Bible. I could see those being written more from a place of connection being the intent behind them. But on a more personal level, it never connected with me and imparted that sacred experience to me. I think there's really just, too much cross-cultural translation, for one that has to happen, and just the fact that it's written in a different time period with different language, it's been translated. I think there's just a lot of barriers to being able to extract that experience, from that text, which is, I don't even think the intent that any of that text was really written from in the first place. But where I'm going with this is these stories that I've read this week, they reveal humanness in its vulnerability and in its most raw state. The human experience presented without judgment, without blaming, just the pure, unadulterated, confusing, vulnerable human experience. Being truly experienced without deflection or avoiding, but just acceptance. And really inviting you into the depths of the experience. And if you've been there, you just know that sacred space. So for me anymore, the Bible that I was raised on, it is just a religious text. And what I mean by that is I feel like it has a place, and that's in offering somebody a religious way to live life and offer them a code to adhere to, which I think definitely has its place. And from a developmental standpoint, I think that's important to give somebody a basis to build off of, and then let them branch out with their own experience and find deeper truth. And I gotta be honest with you, I did edit out one long pause there. And there's a few coughs and clearing my throats that I'll spare you from that I will edit out as well. But I edited out a really long pause there because it kind of feels wrong to say that still, even though I consider myself essentially, a deconverted Christian who still really has, a deep respect for Christianity and religious systems. But it's still ingrained in me, and it's hard to say that this book that I was raised on doesn't necessarily contain all the quintessence of what it means to be human. And something at me just kind of bristles at even saying that, which is strange because I haven't read a Bible in probably 5 or 6 years. But it's so still ingrained in me at a subconscious level that, reading it should be part of your daily routine. And it just reminds me of every Christian retreat I went on, from elementary through high school. You're always supposed to have some sort of deeper spiritual connection on a retreat, right? And if there was ever a goal, like, what's your spiritual goal? It'd always be like, oh, I need to read my Bible more. And that was really out of this place of thinking, it can fix my problems. It's if I adhere to it, life will be okay. But now that I can be a little more honest with myself and honest with you, it just doesn't offer me that fresh breath of true, lived, authentic, and vulnerable human experience. And it just can't center me in the way that these other deep stories can. And saying that takes me back to a moment when I was talking to this guy. This was like right after high school, and I had just gotten my first real job as a commercial electrician. But I was talking to this dude, I was still deep in the faith. I would still very much have considered myself a Christian. And I was talking to this guy that I work with, and we just started talking about church, and he didn't go to church. And like any good evangelical, I was like, okay, I need to convince this guy that he needs to go back to church. So we start talking, and I probably nudged him like, hey, why don't you go to church? You should go. And his reply was, Daniel, I've had way more spiritual experiences fishing than I ever have in church. And that stopped me in my tracks. There's just an experiential nature of things that you don't often get through going to church or through religious texts. And I think what you don't get through those is that key building block that everything else should be built on. A while back, I was interviewing Mark Tidd, a pastor of a church in Denver, Colorado. That was on this podcast, probably early on, episode 11 or 12 or something. But he said something that I just loved. And he was talking about this modern book. I think it was called The River Why. But it was just this book that spoke to him on a deep, spiritual, experiential level. And again, maybe it's something with the fishing. It's a book about fly fishing, I think he said. Something spiritual about fishing, apparently. But talking about that book, from his standpoint as a pastor even, he said something along the lines of that he would trade whole sections of the Bible just to have that book because of how spiritually powerful it is. Yeah. And I hope you've got some of those resources in your life too. What are those? What are those things that speak to you on a far more deeper level than anything from your tradition ever could? But at risk of saying it again, but at risk of repeating myself, that's definitely how I've felt about this article that I read this week and this video that I saw. These are just the sacred texts of our day, the sacred texts of my day. These aren't the texts that will tell you how to live. They aren't the texts that will tell you the mechanics of how to live. But they will tell you, I shouldn't even say they will tell you, they will impart to you what to look for to live well. And as I grow a little older every year, the latter is what's becoming much more important. Well, I'll just close this episode out with one of my favorite Joseph Campbell quotes. And I'm sure I've used this one on the podcast before, but it's just too good and I can't not use it here. But here we go. I don't believe people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive. I don't believe people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive. Oh, I just love that quote. I just love how in so few words he imparts the experiential nature of the human existence. All right. Well, that is it for this week. I will see you right back here in 2 weeks. Well, thanks for listening to the show today. If you have any thoughts, comments, or stories you'd like to share, I absolutely love hearing from you. And you can reach out to me by sending an email to thegroundedpresence@gmail.com. And if you enjoy the show, please make sure to rate and review it on iTunes. Those reviews will really help the show as it continues to grow. And lastly, make sure to stay connected with all the latest news about the show by finding The Grounded Presence on Facebook and Instagram at The Grounded Presence, and now also on Twitter at The Grounded